KDKR Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, KYJC Commerce, KMWC Bethany. Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, what is the Consumer Price Index and why aren't prices falling? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, I want to invite you to go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Once you get to the website, just go to the top of the page, and there's a place to send me an email, and we'll get you taken care of through that method. Or if you need a little bit more time, maybe a phone call, we can set it up. You can set it up online and request a time. So either way, we can get you help. We can get you some help and get you some information. All at the website www.prudentmoney.com. Well, things are getting interesting when it comes to politics, and the question that I get more often than not here is of lately, what do you think about the markets and what do you think about the elections? And I got to tell you, we can sit here and speculate all day long, but I've just never really have seen a time where we're this close to the elections and we don't know anything. Vice President Harris hasn't selected a running mate. Don't know how all that lines up. It should be a very interesting race, and they definitely have polar opposite views of how the world should work. So we'll see what happens. But probably what we'll be doing is gearing up for a webinar to kind of get you ready for it from an investment standpoint. Tell you at least what we're thinking and what some other people are prognosticating about this race. And it's interesting because people are not really doing anything, which makes sense with their portfolios, with their investment accounts. In fact, one survey by an online brokerage company said 73% of the surveyed customers said the election year is not impacting their investment strategy, while only 37% said it is. And meanwhile, a poll by financial news and education platform Finamize, which I've never heard of that, found that only 14.5% of retail investors said that they are making significant changes to their platform ahead of the election. So, when I read something like that, it makes me think emotional decision making. And I think, once again, it's way too early to be making a big move in your portfolio, unless there's something else driving it, and there's a lot of things that could be driving it. And of course, you also wonder, people who aren't making a move in their portfolios, is it because they're convinced that Donald Trump's going to get elected again, and that the market's going to go up like they did last time? And my advice to you would be, what seems to be obvious rarely happens that way when it comes to the market. So we will see. But today we had the inflation webinar, and had a real good turnout. And the thing that I like to see is that everybody who turned out for it stayed the entire time. And we went a little bit over, but talked about a lot of things inflation-wise, and talked about really what you should know. There's a lot of stress and anxiety when it comes to inflation, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday with Charlie Weiss in the program. He was talking about how a lot of the surveys that they're doing with TransUnion and research the research projects they're doing, they're finding that people are extremely stressed, mainly by inflation. And my takeaway from that is that most people don't really understand what it all means, and just the way our culture is, as far as bringing kids up through the school systems and not teaching kids about money and how to responsibly deal with money. But my point is, you don't have to know everything about it. Just know the general definitions of what some of the things that you hear reported in the news. You don't have to get completely in the details on it, and that way you'll be able to interpret a little bit more what you are listening and hearing out of Pop Culture Finance. So we'll try it again here in the next couple of months and talk a little bit about what to expect going forward when we have a little bit more information. Well, the market took a pretty big beating today, and it comes down to these artificial intelligence stocks. I mean, we've had a very large rally in stocks over the past 8-9 months, and it's all been driven by 7 or 8 stocks, and the promise and the expectation that artificial intelligence is going to change everything, and they're going to, and by focusing on these stocks that are responsible for this changeover to artificial intelligence, are going to go sky high. And so you have this small. This is nothing unusual because this has happened. It's happened many times in history. But you got a small group of stocks leading the way. And the problem with that is it really kind of puts a Band-Aid over the problem, and you don't see the other stocks that aren't doing very well at all. It kind of covers up for them. So what happens is that investors in Wall Street really expect perfection when it comes to how those stocks perform. And they're looking very, very, very closely at things like earnings reports and that sort of thing. So yesterday, I think it was Alphabet came out and Tesla came out with a lot lower expectations from what Wall Street wanted as far as profits and earnings and that kind of thing. And so because of that, the conclusion you have, well, maybe we should have not depended so highly on these AI stocks, and so investors start to sell them. So you had about a 2.3% down day on the S&P 500, a 3.64% down day on the NASDAQ. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down the least amount, 1.25. And the question is, how come? Typically they're all when one falls in a big way, the other two fall in a big way as well. The Dow Jones has not been as much of a stock risk as the S&P and the NASDAQ. And why is that the case? And it's because, of course, the NASDAQ has got the technology names in it. It's got the AI stocks, so they're going to take the biggest hit. But the S&P 500 has about 30% of their portfolio is influenced by those AI stocks. So you have more of a technology exposure, which can be good and can be bad for the S&P 500. So we'll wait and kind of see what happens. But it's not been necessarily a great July. In fact, if you look at history, ironically enough, a correction in the market, which is anywhere from 10 to 19% drop in the stock market, is pretty common going into election season. I wish I would have saved that article, but I was looking forward to kind of go over some of the details. But the takeaway is that this is not unusual, and of course, like I said, there are a lot of things to keep your eyes on and make sure that you understand your risk. And that's what today was the message that I ended up with on the webinar, is to make sure that you understand the risks that is out there, because everything gets out of balance, and greed is a big driver of why things get out of balance, and the only way to get them back into balance is through loss. And so you see the market goes in cycles, and we've talked about that many times, and does so going in and out of balance. So it's good. I think today I think we're out of balance more than ever. So it's good to keep an eye on what's happening. Of course, I will do that for you and report to you as needed. So if you have a question, once again, www.prudentmoney.com is the number to call. I did get a question that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and the question was, I don't know if I can find it. Okay, well, here we go. Does national debt have anything to do with inflation? It's interesting about the national debt, and I happened to look up the numbers before the webinar. I hadn't looked at them any. It's been a while since I've looked at them. And what's interesting is that the United States national debt is close to $35 trillion. It's like $34.9 trillion. And about to hit $35 trillion now. $1 trillion is a million millions, if you can believe that. 1 million millions. And so get your head around that number 35 times. It's a lot of money. And incidentally, if you go to usdebtclock.org, we'll talk about that on the other side. This is Bob Brooks. We are up against a break. Stick around. I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
Hi, I'm Jan Markell, host of Understanding the Times. We're very excited to be a part of Bible School Radio. I hope you will join me Saturday, 10 a.m., for cutting-edge guests and the latest information to help you discern the truth, even the inconvenient truth. We'll help you understand our times and contend for the faith. That's Understanding the Times, Saturday at 10 a.m., right here on Bible School Radio or anytime at olivetreeviews.org.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Send it in, and I will get you taken care of. We were talking about the U.S. debt clock, and it's a pretty amazing site when you go to it because it calculates debt right in front of your eyes. Like I said, we're close to turning over to $35 trillion. Take a wild stab if you took all the debt from every single place, all the debt, and added it up. What do you think it would be? I'll tell you, $101 trillion. Now, we just broke that breaks a pretty 101, that breaks into pretty interesting territory. what happens after $1 trillion? I don't think I've ever contemplated that. I think I've heard or read something about it, but I never really paid attention. Never thought I'd need to. But we're at $101 trillion. So the question is, does national debt have anything to do with inflation? I mean, the national debt is involved really with every aspect of the country from a financial standpoint, because we borrow, somewhere between 40 and 50% of everything we spend. So think about that for a second. If you spend $100, you'd have to borrow $40 or $50 of that $100 to spend it. And every dollar you spend, you're only really spending real money of 50 to 60 cents is yours. You're borrowing the rest of it. The problem with the national debt is that, I was looking at one time I was looking at how the debt numbers were broken up and what parts of the budget go, how much money goes to what parts of each the budget, the overall budget. And when you start looking at it, it's like, where do you even cut? And so everything they do is raising the national debt. So it's quite the dilemma. How far can you go without that becoming a real problem? Your guess is as good as mine. It's always amazing to me is that countries, and Japan's a good example of it, is way further ahead of us debt-wise, and have a much bigger problem. Now, they don't have as much debt as we do, but when you compare their amount of debt to the size of their economy, it's much, much bigger than ours. So we will see. It's part of that balancing and imbalancing. The balancing act of a economy, of a market, of bond markets, whatever you want to call it. It's going in and out of balance. So that, I think, is what we're really looking at. We talked a little bit today about the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, and I wanted to talk a little bit about, just mention a few things about that. That's what measures the rate of change of inflation. And it started to pick up in March of 2021. Believe it or not. A lot of it was brought on by COVID and the amount of money that it took to put into the economy that expanded the money supply, which is a big part of it. And a lot of other aspects of the economy started to create this inflation. And it wasn't until a year later that the Federal Reserve started to raise interest rates. We talked all about that today. So the good news is that the Consumer Price Index has been falling. And that's definitely a good sign. You want to see that, but you still go to the grocery store, and in your mind you're thinking, well, the Consumer Price Index is falling. Why isn't the cost of groceries, of food, falling? And the thing that you have to remember about the CPI, Consumer Price Index, is that it measures just the last 12 months. So the big part of the inflation that's already occurred is kind of built into the system now. So the good news is that it doesn't look like it's going to go and spike a lot higher or anything like that. So in my conclusion, in my opinion, is that we're really through the inflation part of it. Now it comes down to getting used to these higher prices. That's the bad news, is that the higher prices tend to stick around and become the new normal. So, one of the things that I would encourage you to do is go through and rework your spending plans. I like the idea of a spending plan more than a budget. and see where you can make the numbers work. Find out where your real sense of inflation is when it comes to the way that you spend money. A lot for all of us, it's going to be food. I mean, food is definitely gone up. I was talking to an executive for HEB, and she covers all of this area for HEB and the stores. And she said that they do analysis on this all the time, and prices on food are up probably about 17%, which sounds right. I mean, if you look at HEB, they're a low price leader as it is. Your other grocery stores are probably 20 to 25% higher, and so which is this is a big jump. So you've got to account for that, and that's going to be that's the tough thing about inflation is that it hits, and it has a after effect to it. But once again, the good news is at least it's not going that much higher. And the other thing is that we didn't have an inflationary period that was real heavy on energy costs. Energy costs definitely went up from where as low as they were when President Trump was in office, but at the same time they didn't get $5-6 a gallon, that kind of thing. So I guess it is what it is, but ignoring the problem is what you don't want to do, and then jumping in there and making sure that you are real clear as to what you're spending and how you are spending it is extremely, extremely important. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Have you heard of bi-weekly mortgage payments? It's something that you might want to check out. Here I am talking about higher prices and telling you to go spend more money. But a bi-weekly mortgage program basically eliminates your mortgage in about, I think it's 6 to 7 years. You pay it off earlier than you would have had you not doing biweekly payments. Biweekly payments are simply taking your mortgage payment, just to keep it easy, say it's $3,000. You take $1,500 and you pay that $1,500 every 2 days. Every 2 weeks. So what it ends up doing is you pay an extra mortgage payment a year. And it's amazing when you do the math, because the math is the math, what that does for you from the standpoint of paying off your home a lot quicker than you normally would. In fact, if we took a $500,000 loan payment and made biweekly payments, the numbers say that the payoff date would be year 24, so that saves you 6 years. Total interest savings of $149,646. Now, when I was first when I first 2 or 3 years in the business back in the early 90s, this company came alongside the investment company that I worked for at the time, promoting this biweekly payment deal. And so the concept and the math all adds up. It's all the same. A biweekly program is a biweekly program. But what always amazed me, and the one thing that you have to be careful about, is fees, because you can. I know that there's. I have to ask Mark Pfeiffer about this mortgage consultant that comes on the program. There's a certain number of banks that will do that for you without any cost. Then there are programs you get involved into. I don't like the idea of programs. In fact, I've checked the numbers. You get almost the same amount of. This is a long time ago, but you get almost the same amount of just increasing your payment by enough so that you've over a 12-month period you pay an extra an extra payment a year. You can do it that way, which is a lot easier. I don't like giving control over to somebody to say, okay, you're going to go into my bank account and pull out a half a payment every 2 weeks. So you can still do it and actually still come out just fine, and you don't pay all the fees. So just something to think about. This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.